Chapter 18. School. It was early Monday morning, and we still had a crowd outside our house, although it seemed that Mum was right, the crowd was dwindling. Mind you, they still weren't disappearing fast enough for my liking. "Am I going to have to walk through that lot to get to school?" I said, frowning out of the front room window. "No, until this whole thing blows over, your dad or I will take you to school," said Mum. "But Dad's gone to work." "So, I'll drive you today." "You'll drive me?" "Yes, I can drive, you know. I have passed my test, but that was when you had to crank up the engine from the front of the car to start it," I scoffed. "And you hate driving?" "Well, I'll just learn to love it, won't I? The police have recommended that that's what we do until all those people outside our house get a life," Mum sighed. "But why go to all this bother?" Mum looked away from me. She couldn't meet my eyes, and in that instant I knew that something was very wrong. "Mum, come on, we better get going. You don't want to be late on your first day back at school." I watched Mum, but I didn't say anything. This was totally unlike her. Mum believed in straight talk and no nonsense. Say what you mean and mean what you say. That was her motto. She was the last one to hide anything from me, but that's what was happening. Won't some of these journalists and rubberneckers be at school too?" I asked. "They have to stay outside the school grounds or they'll be arrested. Journalists have to get school and local authority permission before they can go on to school premises," Mum told me. "In fact, you'll probably get more privacy at school than in this house." Silence. "Are you all right, Mum?" "I'm fine. What about Alex?" Mum patted her pregnant bulge. "Alex is fine too. You've given yourself an anti-rejection injection." "Yes, Mum. And I've taken my tablets and my medicine." Mum asked me that question every morning without fail. "Then we better go. Are you ready, Cam?" I nodded. Something was going on. The question was what? I didn't ask, and Mum wasn't going to say, but I was determined to find out. "Cameron, how are you? How are you feeling? We saw you on telly." For the moment I walked into school, I was surrounded by my friends and others who had never had one word to say to me before. Although it was embarrassing in a strange way, it was also quite nice. I was the centre of attention. I was special. A couple of kids even asked for my autograph. It was bizarre. "I saw you on telly, weed." Travis pushed his way through the crowd to stand in front of me. "I was surprised you had the guts." "My name's Cameron, not Weed," I told him. "And I've got guts and lots more besides. Now could you shift? You're in my way." Travis looked around. "Well, you're braver than me." I stared at him. That was the very last thing I expected him to say. "I don't know if I could have done what you did," he continued. You couldn't, musclehead," I told him without hesitation. "Excuse me?" I swept past him in the best royal fashion. The monarchy would have been proud of me. If Travis thought we could be friends now, he had another thought coming. Not after all the grief he'd given me over the last year. I didn't so much walk as I allowed myself to be swept along to class by the crowd of people around me. And then I saw him, Marlon. I stopped and we both just looked at each other. I didn't know what to say or do, so I said and did nothing. I walked past him without a word. Even as I was doing it, I wanted to stop and go back and say sorry and laugh and have everything just as it had been before. But then I was angry with myself. Why should I apologise? He was the one who should say sorry, not me. And I had the image of the front page of the Daily Press in my head to prove it. So why was I so upset? By the time Mr. Stewart arrived, I had so many people around me I couldn't move. "Anyone who's not in my class can leave, now," Mr. Stewart bellowed out. To be honest, I was glad to see him. All those people surrounding me and asking question after question made me feel as if I was being pecked to bits. Without ceremony, Mr. Stewart ushered all those who shouldn't have been in the class out. The noise was deafening, chatter and laughter and a couple of prods in the back from Andrew, who sat behind me. I grinned at him and looked around, glad to be back. There was Julie. She caught me watching her and immediately looked away. Now that I was like anyone else, maybe Julie and I, my face burning. I carried on looking around. I didn't want anyone else to look at me and guess what I was thinking. Marlon stood over by the window watching me. I'd seen him standing there when I'd been surrounded. He waited until the rest of us had sat down at our desk before coming over to sit next to me. "Cameron, can I talk to you?" he whispered. I looked directly at him. "What about?" I'm sorry about the newspaper article." "Is that what you've got to say? You're sorry?" Neither of us spoke above a fervent whisper. Mr. Stewart was still chucking kids out of his class, but I didn't want to attract his attention, or anyone else's for that matter. "What do you want me to say?" Marlon asked. "You promised me you wouldn't tell anyone about my operation. Now we can't get out of the house for the crowds. We can't use our phone because we've got people calling us day and night. We can't even pick our noses in peace without every movement being recorded and analysed. We have to keep all of the upstairs curtains drawn to stop reporters trying to spy in from our neighbours' houses, and we have you to thank for that. You don't understand. I was upset about what might happen to you. Mum kept pestering me until I told her why I was moping around the house, and then made her promise not to tell anyone. But she told Dad, and he was the one who told the newspapers. I hear your family made a lot of money from selling me out." I was scornful. "It wasn't me," Marlon protested. "Dad did it, not me." "Excuse me, but I told you and only you, and I told you to keep it a secret. Don't blame your dad because he can't keep his mouth shut either. If you'd kept your promise, your dad would never have had a story to tell or sell." I'm sorry. What more can I say? It won't happen again, I promise." "Too right it won't happen again." My eyes narrowed as I regarded Marlon. "You must be nuts if you think I'd ever trust you with another secret." "You can trust me. I won't let you down again." "Read my lips. You won't get the chance. Do you get it? Do you dig it? Do you grab?" That's enough talking, thank you," Mr. Stewart hollered. "What's the matter with everyone today? It's just your ordinary, everyday, standard Monday morning, so let's get on with it." He looked at me. "Please don't ask me to say a few words," I prayed. "Please don't." "Welcome back, Cameron," Mr. Stewart smiled. "Now then, while I take the register, can you all get out your Monday maths book? Double maths first thing on a Monday morning. I love it." I hadn't smiled thanks to Mr. Stewart. I smiled my thanks at Mr. Stewart. Thank goodness he hadn't asked me to show myself up. "Here, Cam," Andrew prodded me in the back again. "We're going swimming tomorrow afternoon after school. Do you want to come?" "Yeah, all right. I'll have to check and make sure it's okay first," I amended. Now that I was well, I wouldn't have to bend the truth anymore about where I was going each Tuesday evening. I asked Mum and Dad if it was okay for me to go swimming, and I was sure they'd say yes. Dr. Bryce hadn't said I could do anything I wanted. I just shouldn't overdo it. My body needed time to build in strength and stamina after 2 years of no exercise because my old heart couldn't take it. But now I had a new heart in me, and that thought never ceases to amaze me. I took my pulse. It was strong and regular, just the way it should be. "You okay?" Marlon asked immediately. I frowned. "Yes, why wouldn't I be?" "You're taking your pulse?" "So, I'm fine. Or are you looking for more info to sell to the papers?" The moment the words were out, I was sorry. I opened my mouth to say so, but Marlon had turned away, and the moment was lost. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I seemed to be lashing out. There was no other way to describe it, and I had no idea why. First Mum and Dad, then Travis, now Marlon. "If I was the one who had a heart transplant operation and you were the one who I told, I would have forgiven you," Marlon said quietly. I looked at him. He looked straight ahead at the teacher. "I have forgiven you," I said. "No, you haven't," Marlon replied. "Yes, I have." Marlon looked at me. He just looked, and in that moment I knew he knew that I was lying. He was right, in spite of all the things I told myself about forgiving but not forgetting. I knew I hadn't forgiven Marlon. Deep inside, I was still angry. Deep inside, I was still hurt. For the rest of the double lesson, Marlon and I listened to Mrs. Stewart drone on and did the exercises we were meant to in our maths books, but we didn't say a word to each other. That was something that had never happened before, and I didn't like it. Chapter 19. The Right Moment. When the double lesson was over, I made a beeline for Julie's desk. I wanted to get to her before she left the classroom. If she was surrounded by all her friends, I'd never pluck up the courage to do this. As she looked up, I gave her what I hoped was my best smile. She got all the teeth and all. Julie looked away, her expression serious. I wondered if she knew what was coming. Or had I done something to upset her? No, I couldn't have. I'd only just got back to school, for goodness sake. Get a grip, Cam, I told myself sternly. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak before I could chicken out. Hi, Julie. Oh, hi, Cameron. There was a distinct frosty look on Julie's face, and it wasn't getting better. It was getting worse. How are you? I asked, to fill the uncomfortable silence descending between us. Julie started reading the book in front of her. I might have thought she didn't want to speak to me if it hadn't been for the fact that the book was upside down, and it took Julie several seconds to realise. I smiled. You might find this easier, and I picked up her book and turned it around for her. When I handed it back to her, she drew away as if I was about to slap her. My smile faded. What's the matter? I asked. Nothing. Here you are. I tried to give her back her book. She drew away even further. Is something wrong? I asked. Just leave it on my desk. Julie tried for a smile, but it came nowhere near her eyes. Puzzled, I regarded her. I had no idea what I'd done, but I'd obviously done something. Was she upset because I hadn't told her about my operation? I hadn't told anyone all the facts except Marlon. I couldn't believe she wasn't talking to me because of that. What are you reading anyway? This wasn't going as well as I'd hoped. I was looking for the right moment to invite Julie to the pictures, but the right moment was rapidly disappearing over the horizon. I looked at the cover of the book Julie had been reading. It was a book called Computer Ghost by some woman I'd never heard of before. The cover was good though. A whirling, swirling mist surrounding a computer screen. Can I borrow it after you? I asked. You can take it now if you like, Julie said quickly, but you haven't finished it. Yes, I have. I've already read it. I was just reading it again. Go on, take it. And as I looked at Julie, it slowly dawned on me what was going on. She was scared of me. I couldn't believe it, and yet I was sure I was right. I don't bite, you know, I tried to say as a joke, but I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. I thrust the book back at Julie. She took a deep breath. Look, Cam, I'm not being funny, but Mum said you could have all kinds of germs and diseases in you now. Germs and diseases that are new to humans and dangerous. Mum said I wasn't to go anywhere near you. It was as if Julie had kicked me in the stomach. I was only vaguely aware of the stillness rippling through the classroom. I stared at Julie. She frowned at me. I don't want to be mean, but you wouldn't take the hint, she whispered. Julie, it's still me, inside and out. I haven't changed. You've got a pig's heart inside of you. Of course you've changed, Julie said, her voice fearful and angry because of it. I haven't got any germs and diseases, I protested. My mouth felt as if it was filled with ashes and they were choking me. You don't know that, not for sure. My mum said, I don't give a stuff what your mum said. Do what you say. What do you say? I asked. Cameron, can we just leave it? Julie looked around the classroom embarrassed. I didn't take my eyes off her. What do you say? I asked again. It was like having a sore tooth that you kept prodding with your tongue, even though it hurts, or a scab you keep picking. I knew I should walk away. I knew I shouldn't just leave it, but I had to hear her say it. I think my mum's right. You've got a pig's heart inside you. So how do you know what's going on in your body now? Slowly, I put the book back down on Julie's desk. I looked around the classroom. Some people couldn't meet my eyes and they looked away. Others looked straight back at me. I realised that Julie wasn't alone. Some of the others didn't like the idea of being near me either. I'd been so blinded by all the people surrounding me earlier that I hadn't noticed the ones who kept well away. I looked down at the ground. I couldn't bear to catch anyone else's eye. Turning, I left the classroom quietly, shutting the door behind me.